Hey guys, this video is going to be a little bit weird format-wise. I'm going to give you a TLDR, basically a very short dot shot kind of form on what you should be doing to draft better and thus get more arena wins. I will be then going into like a deeper explanation on all these points where I'm going to like over-explain everything in case you aren't familiar with Hearthstone terms and concepts. I will be diving pretty deep into that over the next 15 to 20 minutes. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to have a sample draft where I use all the concepts I talk about and show you guys how I would actually go about doing a draft, which will hopefully give you a good example on top of just talking about the theory. So right now, I'll just give you the Cliff's Notes, the quick 1-2 minute kind of, this is what you need to do to draft better and win more. Now, first off, you want to be focusing on your curve. Arena is a game mode where you do not like build from your collection. You are just offered drafts, right? You're offered sets of 3 cards to pick 30 times and you still build a 30 card deck, but the level of cards that you get in terms of power level and the synergies are going to be pretty high variance, which means that you can't force your deck to be built a certain way. So because of that, you want to focus on having a curve. Curve lets you do stuff every single turn, which means you can spend mana, get stuff on the board, and hopefully do more than your opponent. So when you're drafting, try to keep in mind that you want to have a slightly lower curve. Make sure you have stuff to do on turns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then have a few cards for the late game as sort of finishing cards, like finishers. Good examples would be like big dragons or like proto drake or anything big or burn technically would be a finisher as well. Second off, you want to be probably using a third-party tool. Either I use personally hsreplay.net, and this will be in the description below if you need the link, but other people use, I believe, Arena Tracker, which is also linked below, and these can help you decide between specific cards. They have statistics based on how often these cards are picked and how much decks win with those cards included in them. So using either HS Replay or any tracker or any, there's a lot of tools that you can find, but those are 2 that I would recommend. You can use those to help you kind of figure out when you're starting off in a meta to understand which cards are actually good. Some of you might be able to figure that out just by looking at it and reading what it does and saying, oh, it's pretty good. But often it's difficult to know, especially when there's 2 cards that are both looking good to you. How do you know, well, which one's better? A good way to do that is looking at stats, and that's where third-party tools can come in and help you. And finally, the third thing you want to be doing is balancing tempo versus value. There are cards where you can generate more cards, which we've seen in Constructed have a lot of long, fun, drawn-out games by generating more cards, right? You find a 2-mana card that gives you a 3-mana card that then gives you a 4-mana card, or you know, you're running something like a Steward of Scrolls, which discovers a spell. And discovering extra stuff is good because it gives you more value, but discovers tend to be slower. So you want to also have tools in your deck that let you fight for board, that give you tempo. And examples of these are honorable kill cards. One of the most powerful cards right now in the meta is Knight Captain. It lets you remove a thing and make a thing. So you want to make sure you have a balance of those. It's important to fight for board and tempo, but it's also important to have some sort of value in the deck. So balancing those 2 out will ultimately lead you to having better drafts and then more wins. All right, that's the TLDR. If you're curious on a more in-depth explanation and examples and concepts and theories and stuff, I'll be talking about that for the next 10, 15, 20 minutes. But if you don't care about that and you kind of already know what you're talking about, you can just skip ahead to the draft at the end. Now, before we hop in and do sample drafts and stuff, let me talk to you about some concepts. First off, I want to talk about what a curve is. Now, this might seem like a bit of an oversimplification for people like, oh, come on, I know what a curve is. I've been playing Hearthstone forever. Curve is important. You might kind of forget about it. You might autopilot a lot, especially if you play standard mostly, not arena. Curves are important in arena. And what I mean by curve is you'll see that I'm mousing over a sample deck here. This is a standard deck, but the concept still applies. The cards and mana cost that are available in this deck are shown here in a nice little, what do you call it, bar chart. And you can see how many of each mana cost cards there are in the deck. There's 6 1-mana cost cards, 8 2-mana cost cards, etc., etc. In standard, curve doesn't quite matter as much. You have enough synergies in your deck that you can kind of just do powerful stuff regardless of having a curve. And the curve is just like the physical curve you see here. It doesn't quite look like a curve in this particular deck, but it basically dictates how many plays you have on each mana interval, how many things you can do on turn 1, turn 2, and so on and so forth. And really this matters quite a bit more because you don't have the crazy synergies that you have in Constructed. So curve is kind of important, because when you're trying to do good things against your opponent and do more good things than your opponent, generally that's linked to how much mana you spend. So if you're spending 1 mana on turn 1, 2 mana on turn 2, 3 mana on turn 3, you're being efficient with your mana. Mana optimization, you put some stuff into play and you go from there. Now if your opponent, let's say, is doing plays like 1 mana on turn 1, 2 mana on turn 2, 2 mana on turn 3, 2 mana on turn 4, you're going to be making more powerful plays because you're spending more mana, and on average, cards that cost more mana are probably more useful. So because of that, we want to try to get a relative curve. We want to keep track of how many cards we have available in each mana slot and try to draft accordingly to keep our play options open. Now, generally, control decks don't really exist in Arena. Kind of a rule of thumb, because you're drafting from random cards, you're not going to be offered crazy good control tools. You might be offered some, like for example, in Mage, Flamestrike is a very famous card in Hearthstone's history because it's been around forever and it's just a crazy good card. You might see Crip complaining about Flamestrike in any other, like any Arena video you might see in the past. Flamestrike is a great control tool. Now, if you get offered a few Flame Strikes, that's awesome, but you're not really going to have 3 or 4 Flame Strikes every run. You're not going to be offered Brawls every run. You're not going to be offered armor gain, removal, and like big threats like huge dragons every run, which is kind of what a control deck wants to do, right? Control the board, remove threats, and then win your game with your win condition. That doesn't happen too much in Arena because you're just offered random cards, so you kind of have to build your deck around what you're offered. So there's some adaptability there that you have to kind of just adapt to what's offered to you. So you can't go in saying, I'm going to make a control deck. Now, you could do that and say, I'm going to pick the most controlling card every single pick. The problem with that is that you're going to end up with a really wonky deck that might have some control aspects to it, but ultimately will not be cohesive enough or as cohesive as a standard deck. And you'll find that you'll probably get run over by some other decks. So although it is good to draft maybe some removal cards, I would not go in expecting to draft like a specific archetype. You kind of have to go with what you're offered. And because of that, the curve tends to be a bit lower because, again, you want to be doing stuff on turns 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. You'll be wanting more cards on the lower part of the curve, 1, 2, 3s, and 4s, because you're going to be wanting those plays more often. Every game is going to have a turn 1, every game is going to have a turn 2 and 3. Now, as we go further on the mana curve, the games might not go on to turns 7, 8, 9, 10. So you don't really want 5 9 mana cards because you're probably not going to play them all in any given game. And on top of that, if your opening hand and the mulligan happens to be like 3 7 mana cards and an 8 mana card, you're passing a lot. You're going to be turn 1 pass, turn 2 pass, turn 3 pass. Oh, good, I top decked a 4 drop. Now I can actually start doing stuff. Meanwhile, your opponent's already hitting you in the face with 3 minions. So because of that, generally the curve in Arena tends to be a bit lower, except in some extreme cases where you're just offered crazy good cards and you can actually build a nice cohesive deck. And sometimes you will see that. But generally, curve a little bit earlier, not quite as aggressive as this deck. This is Pirate Warrior, for those who are familiar with it in Standard. You just have a bunch of very cheap pirates. But this is kind of the idea, right? You have some early plays, and then it kind of tapers off as you have some finishers. In this case, in Standard, it's like Mr. Smite is your sort of, end the game type card. In Arena, you'll find that it does go a bit more than 6 mana. There are some powerful 8 mana cards, and it kind of depends on the meta. And I'll be talking about how to identify what cards are good shortly. But this, as a start, was just curve is important in Arena, a little bit more important than Standard because that you just have to play with whatever stuff you're given. Now, linked to the curve is another concept I want to talk about, tempo and value. They're kind of 2 sides of a scale or coin or whatever you want, whatever analogy you want to use. Tempo is kind of how much stuff you can put into play, to put it in simple terms. Value, we can talk about it as how much total mana you have available in the deck. Let's go back to the example where we have 4 or 5 9 mana dragons. That's a lot of value. But if you're passing on turns 1, 2, 3, and 4, you don't have a lot of tempo. You don't have a lot of stuff in play on the board that's letting you fight or hit your opponent in the head. And similar to curve, you want to balance some tempo and value. You do want some late game cards. You do want some powerful tools. But you also need to be spending mana, because if you can't get to the point where you can use those late game tools and threats, then it doesn't matter, right? If you're dead on turn 5 every game, it doesn't matter if you have 30 dragons in your deck. I think that's enough for tempo versus value because it is pretty closely linked to curve, like having a curve and being able to spend mana efficiently. And that's kind of the things I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to have a couple sample drafts at the end of this run, and in those drafts, I'll try to talk very... I'll be overly descriptive in what I'm doing, what choices I'm making, why I'm picking these cards, so that you can apply these concepts to more metas, not just, oh, in this meta, I know that this particular card's good. Right. I think that's kind of all the context you need. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you have some Hearthstone background, but I think actually describing these concepts will help you point to why I'm picking specific cards in the drafts. Okay, I think that's pretty good as a sort of basis. Now let's hop into some drafts so you guys can see what I'm talking about. All right, one more thing to talk about before we hop into drafting. Card quality, and this is also kind of linked to value. There are some cards that are actually just so good that it's worth picking them over like curve cards, just because they can win the game by themselves. And I'll try to make note of these as well during the drafts. But sometimes it is just better to pick the craziest thing. And generally the way I do recommend drafting, actually this is a very important part, write this one down. You have 30 cards available to you when you're drafting, well, 30 options. The way I like to draft is in the first 10 to 15 cards, maybe even 20, I try to focus on picking the best card. I pick cards that are good for value, good for fighting for board. Like I pick the best standalone card, and that might be hard for you to identify because the meta changes. You might not be familiar with all the cards and the three options you're given. Like, how can you evaluate? Oh, out of these 3/4s, this one's the best 3/4 for 3 mana. That's not that easy to do. Over time, you'll kind of understand from experience and from maybe watching other people stream or play which ones are better. But I have a tool that you can use, and I'll show you what I'm using. I use HearthstoneReplay.net. Some of you guys might be familiar with this. It's a stat aggregation site, and it just has a bunch of statistics. If you go here on the main page of HSReplay.net, I'll have a link to this below so you can access this whenever you'd like. There is an arena button here that shows you what the general win rate of classes are in arena. I generally use this if I'm trying to get a high number of wins because I like picking classes that win more because I don't know, I like winning. I like having fun. I don't always do that, but if you're trying to be optimal and try to pick good stuff, I would lean towards the heroes that are higher up here when you're offered the class to draft. Now, let's say we did pick Shaman in our run. All right, let's click on Shaman here. Once we click on that, we have a bunch of cards. In fact, it has all the cards available in the draft, even though it doesn't show them on the same page here. And there's a search bar. So now this search bar, you can enter cards separated by commas, and this will present to you the win rate of decks that are running this card. For example, let's look at Windchill, let's look at Tower Sergeant, and let's look at, I don't know, Frostbite. Separated by commas, it pulls up the 3 cards. Now, Windchill pulls up 2 cards here, Windchill and Sleepbreaker. Let me quickly click here so that it sorts by deck win rate. Let's say my 3 options are Windchill, Frostbite, and Tower Sergeant. If we're going purely by win rate, Windchill seems to be the best card. The decks that contain Windchill win 60.3% of the time. Decks that contain Frostbite win 60% of the time, and so on and so forth. So if you aren't familiar with what to choose yet, I would recommend using a set like this, or I also have another, I believe there's a tool called Arena Tracker that will actually show you in-game what these kind of win rates are, and it'll show you, I believe, from 3 different sources. One is HS Replay, one is, I think, Hearth Arena, and then there's a third one. I don't personally use that, but I know some good Arena players who do use that, but it does require you to download and install it. So if you don't want to deal with that, hsreplay.net you can just use in your browser. So if I'm just going by win rate and I don't fully understand how to draft properly, I need some more experience, you can just type in the cards here and pick which one's better. Now, you'll notice that all 3 of these cards are actually quite good in Shaman, and they're very, very similar win rates. At this point, early on in the draft, you could just pick the best card. And yeah, just as a reminder, we're talking about how to pick your cards. In the first 10 to 15 to 20 cards, I just try to pick the card that's the best because it's pick the good card. After that, I try to figure out what my deck's missing. I try to see, okay, how's my curve looking? Do I have enough value? Do I need some removal? Stuff like that. And then I disregard the win rate a bit more and think more about what I think would fit my deck better. For example, if this was in the first 5 or 10 cards, I'd probably take a Wind Chill. It's just solid. Maybe a Frostbite if I'm partial to Frostbite and I like that a bit more. But I would probably just pick this. But if this was like the 26th card that I'm drafting my deck, and I'm thinking, well, my deck already has 3 Wind Chills. I have 1 4-mana card. It's not super important to have that many 4-mana cards. Maybe in Shaman I can Hero Power, and that kind of makes up for it if I have a 2-mana card as well, but I would still like some more 4-mana plays. So even though this Tower Sergeant is slightly worse than Windchill and Frostbite and Windrate, it would make more sense to the 26th card in my deck if I don't have any 4-mana plays. And this is going back to having stuff to do every turn, being able to curve 1, 2, 3, 4 if possible. Now, it's not the end of the world if you don't do that, because you can still make up for that. You can still Hero Power, you can have a removal card that costs 3 mana, you can develop a 3-mana card on 4. Like, there's options, but generally, if you have good stuff to do every turn, that's good. So, as a 26th card, if I'm missing 4 drops, I might take a Tower Sergeant instead of the other 2 cards, despite the other 2 cards being, on average, better, because I'm trying to finalize my deck and fill some holes that the deck might have. That example is kind of used for all my picks. If it's early on in the draft, I don't have a specific number that I go by. I don't switch to, oh, this is card number 18, now I have to start filling holes. Sometimes you just pick the better card because it's just substantially better. But this is something to keep in mind. What is my deck missing, or what is your deck missing? And try to fill those holes if possible. If not, you know, you might not be offered something to fill those holes, but try to keep that in mind. And you'll kind of learn over time based on what your decks are doing that some things may be good and some things may not be good. As an example, if you don't draft any cards more than 4 mana, you're going to find out that in some games, you're just going to run out of stuff because you spend all your mana, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you start filling in the curve with 1+4, 2+4, whatever you have left in your hand. And your opponents are going to start playing some bigger minions, and then you're going to run out of stuff because your opponents just have more stuff. So that might be too aggressive of a deck. Maybe you need to focus on getting some more value. Some runs you might have 3 Proto Drakes or 3 big dragons in your hand, and you're like, you know what? It really doesn't feel good when my opening hand is Ystera, Deathwing, and Malygos. Maybe I should try drafting some, you know, a little less late game so I don't get run over as much. And again, those are extreme cases, but these are things you're going to want to be thinking of when drafting. There's no super shortcut. There's just tips and tricks, and you just kind of have to start gaining experience and knowledge, and over time you'll understand how to get better with drafting. So this guide is meant to be a useful tool for you to understand what you need to be looking out for. This is not a, bam, I'm going in, making the best draft ever right off the bat. It's going to take some practice. Now, as a reminder, link to hswp.net and the arena tracker are below. We're going to hop into some sample drafts so you guys have an idea of what this looks like, you know, as an actual example instead of just talking about theory. Yeah, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let's hop into the drafts. That's the word. All right, let's go. Okay, guys, let's hop in, start doing some drafts. Shaman is really good right now. I'm gonna pick Mage though. I kind of like Mage. Mage is fun. Yeah, let's do some Mage. Mage is fun. Okay, right off the bat. We have a few options here. There's a 3-mana 0/4, 5-mana 4/6, Forgotten Torch, 3-mana deal 3 damage, shuffle a Roaring Torch into your deck that deals 6. So it shuffles like a cheaper Fireball into your deck. Generally, I don't like Toothy Chest too much. Minions that gain stats later are kind of weird because if your opponent is already on board and you play this, they can trade into your minion for free, and then it dies without doing damage back to them. So this is generally not great. Sometimes you don't have other options, and eh. Lake Thresher, well-statted minion. Cleave is relatively decent in arena, that's fine. Forgotten Torch can be removal, can be burn, not bad. Shuffles more removal and burn into your deck, not bad. So I would say it's between Forgotten Torch and Lake Thresher. I think that Forgotten Torch might have a higher win rate. But I'm going to check stats. And when I'm saying I'm checking stats, I'm looking up the win rates on HS Freeplay. So Lake Thresher has a bit of a higher win rate. We'll go for Lake Thresher. I'm not super partial to Forgotten Torch. 3-mana deal 3 isn't super exciting. Thresher's fine. Okay. 2-mana 2/3. It's a decent stat line. I'll be talking about stat lines a lot. There's kind of like average number of statistics or stats, like health and attack, that units have together. And generally, units that have higher stats are better for their mana cost. But 2 mana, 2/3, for example, 2 mana, 2 attack, 3 health. That's pretty standard for a 2 mana minion. 3 mana minions, 3 mana, 3/4, and then past that, it kind of changes a bit based on what other things the cards have. Blitzer is fine. Bone Wraith is pretty good. Valid Teacher is okay. We don't really have any spells in the deck. In Arena, you're not really offered a crazy amount of spells. Some decks will have a lot of spells, but I don't think Valid Teacher is necessarily the pick here. I think I like Bone Wraith or Bloodseal Raider. I think I'll lean towards Bone Wraith. There's not, in this particular meta, there's not a crazy high amount of 4 mana minions, and Bone Wraith is an acceptable one. I'll be offered more 2 mana minions throughout the draft, so I'm not super enticed to do this. I'm also not a weapon class. Let me move my my face over here so you can see that I'm a mage. So there's no synergy with this either. We'll take a Bone Wraith here. This is fine. Okay. Ancient Shade. 4 mana 7/4 seems good, but it shuffles a 7 damage bomb in your deck. Not super great. Ice Barrier is okay, but not great. 3 mana, gain 8 health. Generally, you want to do tempo things in Arena, and gaining health is not necessarily bad, but it's not as good as, I would say, developing something onto the board. Both of these don't seem great. Primordial Studies is a pretty good card right now. The spell damage minion pool is quite small, and you're almost guaranteed, not quite guaranteed, but you're very likely to get Steward of Scrolls, which is a card that lets you discover a spell. So spells are good in Arena because you're not offered a lot of them, and they're class cards, which tend to be more powerful. Because of that, I'm kind of into Primordial Studies. It's a little flexible. I can get some other minions. It doesn't have to be Steward of Scrolls, but ideally this into Steward of Scrolls into a powerful spell would be great. Framebot, 2 mana, 1/5. Decent stats, but I don't like drafting 1 attack minions on 2 too much. I like having slightly higher attack minions that let me trade into things. 2 mana, deal 2. On will kill, reduce the cost of spells in your hand by 1. This can go face as well, so it's kind of removal, kind of face damage. I think I like Ice Revenant a little bit more. 4 mana 4/5 is pretty acceptable stat-wise. This doesn't seem too exciting. Again, you're not going to have a crazy amount of spells like you might in standard, so the fact that this has an interesting honorable kill isn't actually that useful. I think 4 mana 4/5 is good. Wow, okay. Legendaries. Belinda Stonehearth, Battlecry, draw 2 spells, swap their cost with this minion stats. So this is good in Big Mage. We are not Big Mage. This is actually probably pretty bad in our deck. Mazaki, 5 mana 3/8, stat-wise is okay. We don't really have spells to take advantage of that. And the other option is Egwin, 5 mana 5/5, okay, spell damage +2, and Death Rattle, the next minion you draw inherits these powers. So once this dies, my next minion that I draw will have +2 spell damage, and then once that dies, the next, and so on and so forth. It's between these two. I'm leaning towards Egwin because it just gives me not quite permanent, but pseudo-permanent spell damage. And once more, you're not going to be offered that many spells, but meh. I'd rather have a 5 mana 5/5, I think, over a 5 mana 3/8. So we'll just take Egwin. Okay, Defender Vargas, 4 mana 3/3, +2/2 if you buff 2 minions, and it gives them taunt. Noyatron, 2 mana 1/2 taunt Divine Shield. Both of these are acceptable picks. This isn't super big stats-wise, but having some level of taunts is nice because you can't always control your opponent's board perfectly. So at some point, you can try to set up some taunts, hit them in the head, and try to kill them before they can get through your taunts and either kill you or your minions. So having taunts can be useful, but 2 mana 1/2 Divine Shield taunt, not super exciting. Still okay, but I would just take Wild Thief here. Discovering a Mage spell, once more. Spells are pretty good. And this is a very cheap way to generate a spell. And you can discover it too, which is quite nice. It's not super random. Okay, 4 mana 3/3. Only you can target this with spells and hero powers. Not super exciting. 4 mana 3/3. Beast, we don't really have Beast synergy. Crazy Alchemist might look like a meh card because it's a 2 mana 2/2. But cards like these are actually kind of useful in Arena because you can deal with problematic minions where you might not otherwise be able to because once again, you don't have a lot of spells or removal. So Crazy Alchemist can change like a... Let's use this as an example. Even if we change Lake Thresher to a 6/4, maybe that lets us cleave and kill 3 minions on our opponent's side of the board that have 6 health instead of 4 health. Or maybe my opponent plays a Gurubashi Berserker, a 2/8. I can Crazy Alchemist it, it becomes an 8/2, and then I can kill the 2 health pretty easily. Otherwise, Curse Disciple. 4 mana 5/1, Death Rattle, summon a 5/1. Decent stats. I think I might take an Alchemist here. I'm not super in love with the 5/1 Death Rattles right now. Demon Hunter is a pretty popular class in Arena. Mage isn't super popular, but Demon Hunter is quite popular, and Demon Hunter can hero power this for one mana, which is pretty efficient. So I'm not super excited to take this. I already also have two 4-mana plays, so I'm not really desperate for 4s. We'll take an Alchemist. Okay. Jungle Panther, 3 mana 4/2 stealth. Cosmic Anomaly, 4 mana 4/3 spell damage +2. We don't really have spells, so this is more of a 4 mana 4/3. 4 mana 4/3 doesn't sound very exciting. It can be useful. That we can also find some cheap spells to use with it, but it's a little conditional that we have to find spells. And you're not guaranteed to find spells. An average deck will have a few, but it is to some extent random. Grim Necromancer is okay. It summons 3 bodies, it's 4 mana 2/4, and 2 1/1s, which is 4 mana 4/6 if you add them all up. It doesn't quite work like that because obviously they're separate bodies, the smaller minions can be picked off, but this seems fine, stats-wise. Okay. Goblin Bomb, 1 mana 0/2, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero when it dies. This can't actually fight for board. It can't make any attacks because it has 0 attack. Not super exciting. Shivering Sorceress, 1 mana 2/2, pretty good stats, and reduces the cost of the highest cost spell in your hand by 1. Once more, we don't have many spells, but 1 mana 2/2 is pretty good. We don't really have 1 mana plays yet. Intellect tends to be pretty good. This is something that's meta dependent. Arcane Intellect has historically been a great card, 3 mana draw 2, and it's still okay, but the meta is very tempo oriented right now, and I'd rather play stuff instead of drawing cards. So I'm not super excited for this. Like I would take an Intellect if I have other options that aren't great, but Shivering Sorceress is pretty good, and I think it's better than taking the card draw. Okay, not great options. 2 mana 2/2, Battlecry, give your weapon. We don't have weapons, and nor can we draft them. 5 mana 4/4 with a Death Rattle. 5 mana 4/4 is meh. The Death Rattle's okay, but it's kind of slow. I don't have any 2 mana cards yet. I do have an Alchemist that I probably won't be playing on 2 very often because I'll be saving it to get use out of its Battlecry. So I think a Bloodseal Raider is fine at this point. Okay, more 4 mana 4/5s. I have a few 4s already. I have a couple of 5s as well. Bloodguard is particularly useful. This is a newer card. 5 mana 4/7 is really good, and also it benefits the rest of your board because your other minions gain 1 attack when it is damaged. Mage specifically can use its hero power to ping it and get that damage without having to trade the Bloodguard in, so that can buff your whole board. I have a few 4s, I have a few 5s. I think I'll take Bloodguard here. Bloodguard's a better card than these two. Okay, wow. Luna's Pocket Galaxy used to be great in Standard, not so good in Arena, because you don't really have card draw to support it and so on and so forth. You don't want to take 7 mana off. Malygos, we have a spell. Not super useful. Stat line is still good. It's not bad to have some chunky minions, but I'm going to take Ras Frost Whisperer. 5 mana 3/6 with a deal 1 damage to all enemies is good. We have Studies in the deck that synergizes with it. We can get more spell damage. We have Aegwynn, which will carry through our deck, which is insane. And we can find some more stuff maybe with One Thief. Frost Whisperer is insane. Let's do this. Okay, we have some options here, and this is a good example. We're still, what, 12 cards in? I've been picking the best cards so far. Stat-wise, 12 year is the best card here. This is a 2 mana 2/3. 2 mana 2/3, decent stat line. Now compare this to a Tomb Spider, 4 mana 3/3. You paid 2 more mana for 1 more attack? Ugh. However, let's say our deck already has plenty of 2 mana minions. We have good tempo, but maybe we don't have late game. For this example, in our deck, for example, we don't have anything over 5 mana. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We could just end up being a more aggressive deck. But if we were oversaturated on our 2s and 3s, we could consider taking a Tomb Spider here because it's more value. Battlecry, Discover Beast. So even though 4 mana 3/3 is not great for stats, it's a thing, and it gives me another thing, value. That being said, still pretty early on the draft. I don't want to just pick value because we're definitely not saturated on 2 drops yet. I still want to focus on my curve, so I'm going to take a 12 here. Okay, Faithful Lumi, 1 mana 1/1, Battlecry, give a friendly mech +1/+1. Mechs in the deck, we have 0 mechs. Generally, this isn't a good card anyways. It's just conditional. I don't want to play this on 1. There's not much upside to it. Cogmaster, same thing. We don't have mechs. This is a sneaky scout just because the 2 mana 3/2 seems better than the stats on these. But this is just a 2 mana 3/2 is a good stat line, and the Honorable Kill effect is good as well. because it makes your next hero power cost 0, which is good. So it's good stat line, and it saves me mana if it gets an honorable kill. Cool. Okay, spell. Don't auto pick spells. Spells are good, but you don't necessarily always want to pick them. We have two 2-mana 2/3s here. We don't have any secrets in the deck, and this is a very, very useful card. If it was between these two, I would always pick Snow Flurry. Almost always. Probably always, actually. Even if I do have secrets in the deck, I think this is more useful than an extra +1/+1. Freezing a target is very good. You can set up board states where you try to set up lethal. Your opponent plays a minion to contest. You freeze it, then you hit him in the head and try to kill him. And it's just a 2-mana 2/3 with a ping attached to it, which is good as well. I would take Snow Flurry here. Shooting Star is decent, and we also have a deck that can take value, can use this effectively because we have Egwin in the deck and a Primordial Studies. So the Shooting Star actually becomes really good because of the fact that we have extra spell damage. But I think I'm just gonna take a Snow Flurry. You're not always gonna be AoEing. AoE is like removing multiple things at once. And sometimes I'm not going to have Egwin or Studies, so I'm going to pick the better standalone card here. This has good synergies, but this is just a better standalone card, and I'd rather just have a card that's good on its own instead of forcing synergies that might not show up in the run. Okay. This is a good example of 3 not really great tempo options. 1 mana 0/2 doesn't fight for board. It gets in the way, stops some attacks, which isn't bad sometimes. Infested Goblin, 3 mana 2/3 taunt. Death Rattle, add 2/1/1 scares with taunt to your hand. So it's slow, but it adds a few taunts. It's not bad. Weaponized Pinata, we talked about this. 4 mana 4/3 isn't bad. So none of these are really great stat wise. Couple things to consider. We're halfway through the draft. We could look at Curve a bit. I am missing 3 mana cards. This isn't a particularly great 3 mana card. This is almost as good as playing a 2 mana card on 3, right? Because the stats are the same. So I'm not super excited to take this because it's a 3 mana card. I think I would just rather take a Pinata here. Adding a random legendary to your hand is pretty good. It's some value. None of these are super great tempo options, but I think Pinata's has the most upside from what it offers. Infested Goblin could be okay if I don't have any other plays, but we're probably going to find some more 3 mana plays by the time this draft ends, so I'll just take the better card here, which is Pinata. Okay, Generous Mummy, 3 mana 5/4, Reborn. Your opponent's cards cost 1 less. Generally, making your opponent's stuff cost less isn't very good, so I'm not super into Generous Mummy. Microtech Controller is okay. 3 mana 2/1, and you get 2 1/1s out of it. So all in all, that's what, 4/3 stats, but spread across multiple bodies that can be pinged, which isn't great. And we have a Fungal Mancer. Fungal Mancer is pretty good. Buffing 2 minions for +2/+2, very good. Now, the caveat there is that you need 2 minions in play. Are we a tempo heavy deck? Are we expected to have a lot of board by turn 5 where we can jam a Fungal Mancer? Maybe, maybe not. We have a Curve. It's not bad. Notably, we are missing 3 mana cards. This is particularly not a great 3-drop. There is a card in the meta right now called Bunker Sergeant, which is meta dependent, but Bunker Sergeant is 3 mana 2/4 Battlecry. If your opponent controls 2 or more minions, do 1 damage to all of your opponent's minions, which just destroys this. So we're getting towards the end of the draft where I'm going to want to focus on Curve more. Fungal Mancer is a better standalone card. Microtech Controller I could use to fit my Curve here. I'm going to take Fungal Mancer here because I think I still would like the better card here. But after this pick, I'm going to start focusing a bit more on Curve to make sure I have enough stuff. I'm also missing the late game stuff. I don't have anything more than 5 mana. I might not need anything more than 5 mana. We might not be offered that, and at that point we become a bit more of an aggressive deck, which is okay, but something to keep in mind. We want some more late game, and we maybe want some 3-drops. These are not 3-drops. I have a mech, but this 4 mana 3/4 is not great on tempo, and my mech that I have is 4 mana, so I would have to be playing an awkward Curve to be able to get value out of this. Bone Wraith or Crimson Hothead are both fine. I have some spells in the deck, so this becomes a 4 mana 4/6 sometimes, or I can just take a 4 mana 2/5 Reborn Bone Wraith. Both of these are okay. I think I'll lean towards Bone Wraith here. If I had a couple more cheap spells, I would lean towards Hothead, but I think Bone Wraith is fine. There is a card that kills or deals 6 damage to dragons in the meta, which is not super popular, but it can pop up, so I'll just take a safer pick here. 3 mana 2/4. Not super exciting as a 3 mana card. I think I just take another 12 right here. We're okay on 5s. You want to have generally more 2s and 3s than you have 5 mana minions, and we're kind of high on 5s. I think I'll just take a 12 right here. 3 mana 2/4 is kind of meh. The Battlecry is not super exciting to me either, so we'll take a 12 here. Okay, Bloodguard, Taskmaster, and Berserker. Best card is Bloodguard. Taskmaster is okay. 3 mana 2/4 is not great, but you get 2 armor scraps that each give +2 health to a minion, and they cost 1 mana. And a Temple Berserker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 2-mana cards and an Alchemist. I don't count this quite as a 2-mana card because I don't want to play this on 2. Sometimes you have to for tempo, but I would prefer not to. So we have 5 2-mana cards, so I could consider a 2-mana card. I don't think I want to. I think it's one of these two. I think I might take the Taskmaster here. Generally, I don't like the stat line on this, but I have quite a few 5s at this point, and Bloodguard is excellent, but it'll come back to an example that I gave earlier in the guide. If my opening hand is 4 or 5 mana minions, I'm not going to be very happy. We'll take a Taskmaster. This is okay. Yucky. These are not very good. Okay, so Toxicologist, we talked about. We don't have weapons, and we can't get weapons. So this is strictly worse than the Kobold Geomancer. So the options are Divine Ranger or Kobold Geomancer. I have quite a few 4s. I could use a 2-mana card. It does also work with Wrath. I don't have other spells to use it with. So I have to consider if I want this for some potential upside with Wrath or Wand Thief, or if I want just a 4-mana 5/1. Also gives me a 2-mana play. I don't have a lot. Generally, I look for like 6 to 7 2-mana cards, depending on the deck. Sometimes you just take better cards instead and you accept that you have fewer early plays, but this is kind of tough between these two. I'm leaning towards Divine Ranger because it's just a minion that actually does something. This actually doesn't have too much upside. I think I'll take a Divine Ranger. There's a lot of cards in the meta right now that have honorable kill on them. For example, Sneaky Scout. And quite a few of them have 2 attack, which would honorably kill the Geomancer. So I really don't want to play Geomancer as a 2-mana play. And because of that, I'm just going to take a Divine Ranger. Okay. These are some options. So Sorcerer's Substitute is actually really interesting with our deck in particular because we have Studies and Egwin. And that actually is not super difficult to get active. However, we don't have many 1-mana cards. Now, 1-mana cards aren't integral, but they help curve you out, and they help fill in turns. For example, if I don't have a lot of 3-mana cards in this deck, I could on turn 3 go 2-mana card and a 1-mana card, and that still lets me spend mana efficiently. So because of that, 1-mana minions can be pretty good. Cone of Cold, also kind of useful. Does some AoE and it freezes, which can create situations where we can ignore the board and go face. And we have spell damage that works with it as well. All 3 of these are actually quite good picks. I'm going to be a little greedy here, and I think I'm going to take the Substitute. No, I lied. I'm going to take the Mermaid. So Substitute is more value, and it has some payoff. But I am missing 3s, and I don't have a lot of 1s. So I think this will help my early curve more. And this is where I'm turning down value for tempo. Even though I wouldn't mind some late game, my curve is a little awkward, and this will help make it less awkward. Arcane Tyrant costs 0 if you cast a spell that costs 5 more this turn. We do not have any spells that cost 5, so I do not want to be playing a 5-mana 4/4 in my deck. So it's between these two. I think I'm going to go for the Ritualist. We're okay on 4s. An extra 2-mana 2/3 is not bad, and we have some synergy here with 12 here. This starts off as a 2-mana 2/3, but it can go up to 6 health. So this can heal it up. This also lets me trade some other minions and then heal up as well. So I think it's a Ritualist. We're a bit high on 4s. 2-mana card is good, and it has some synergies in our deck. Okay, we have 2 late game plays and a Cone of Cold. I am lacking some late game. Wrap Golem is quite good. Reborn minions are annoying to deal with because they're sticky, and this also spawns taunts in the way, which generates value and makes it annoying for opponents. Wrap Golem is one of the premium cards right now in this meta. This might change depending on what meta you're in, but I know that this is a good card. Scorpion's okay. It's a chonker, can kill some stuff. Cone of Cold is decent too, but I will, I think, take the Wrap Golem here. If this was like a Flame Strike, I might lean towards this instead, but this isn't quite, I'm going to use the word hard removal. Hard removal generally kills something. It's more used to talk about single target. For example, like a Polymorph, which no longer exists. A Hex, a Fireball can be considered hard removal if it kills something. Cone of Cold usually doesn't kill stuff. Sometimes it does, but often you use it to freeze and delay the game a little bit. But I'm going to take Wrap Golem here. Okay, we do need 3s. So Panther's actually pretty good here. Jar Dealer is interesting. Jar Dealer is something I can play on 1, and it gives me another 1-mana minion to play later on to fill in my curve. So this helps me to do something on 1. It can also help me to do something on 3, which makes it a bit more flexible than Jungle Panther. That being said, this probably won't add up to like 4 attack. So do I want a 3-mana 4/2 stealth minion? I could also consider Gnome Private as well. I would lean towards Jar Dealer over Gnome Private here because of the issue I talked about. I don't have 3-mana cards and I'm not super high on 1. You don't need that many ones, but having some ones is nice. It's between a Jar Dealer and Jungle Panther for me. I don't like Jungle Panther too much as a card. Minions that can take a hit and survive are very good. And Jungle Panther doesn't do that. Now, Jungle Panther can sometimes kill 4-mana minions, which is good because I'm spending 3 mana to kill a 4-mana minion. But there's not that many 4-mana minions that die to 4 right now. And some, like, there's some, but general stats is a 4-mana 4/5. Or something like a Necromancer. And this doesn't trade very well into those. I think I'm actually going to lean towards Jar Dealer here over these two. Jar Dealer also gives some high roll potential. You can get like Wand Thieves, Ibis, which is good in the meta right now. Jungle Panther's okay here. This also deals with my lack of 3s to some extent. I just don't like Jungle Panther too much. Okay, we have some options here. Mage Scribe is good value. Spellburst, add 2 random spells from your class to your hand. We talked about spells being useful. Now, I do have to be able to activate it. Spellburst means I have to cast a spell. I have Studies. I have Wand Thief, which can get me another spell, and that's about it. So in terms of how many ways I have to activate this, it's not a lot. I do have the coin half the time. More than half the time. I do have the coin half the time, which can also be used to proc this, but generally you want to be using coin for tempo. So this is somewhere where I could, it's not Cosmic Anomaly, I'm heavy on 4s, I don't have that many spells to use with it, so it's Torch or Mage Scribe. Now Torch is a 3-mana card. It doesn't develop stuff, but I can use it on turn 3 for removal. I can save it later for burst. We turned 1 down earlier. I still think I like Mage Scribe here. Torch is an acceptable card. We don't really have card draw, so we're not getting the second half of the Torch that often. So most games, if I have it, it's going to be a 3-mana deal 3, which is okay, but not great. So because of that, I think I'm going to take the Mage Scribe. Gives me a little bit more late game as well. Even if I can't proc the spell, 4/9 is a lot of stats to get through. This has some upside. This gives me value. This isn't really good tempo. It can be used as removal, but it doesn't actually generate that much tempo. So because I'm not offered a great tempo option here, I think I'll take the Mage Scribe to add some greed to the deck. Okay, we don't have any secrets in our deck, so this isn't that useful. We could generate one maybe, but it's very conditional, and I already have some 5s. Explodinator, I'm heavy on 4s, and this just isn't very exciting. Bombs are useful because I could Fungomancer them, but like, 1 mana 2/2, seems good. Could use another 1. Lets me use it on turn 3 with my hero power as well. Shivering Sources, good. These aren't great. 5 mana 5/5, not super exciting. Once again, I have enough 5s. Stegatron is okay. The 6 mana 5/6, which isn't great. There's some synergy with the Ritualist, which isn't bad. I'm probably just taking the Microtech here. This is the point where I just don't have any 3s, and this is not a great 3, but it's a 3. These two aren't super exciting, so we'll take this. Oi, 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 these are bad. So Conjure Mirage isn't very good because it doesn't do anything. At the start of your turn, shuffle this into your deck, which means that I play it, my opponent doesn't attack into it, it gets shuffled into my deck, and it's gone, and I spend 4 mana delaying the game, which isn't great. Unpowered Mauler, we don't have that many spells, which is very good. Oh, I forgot to mention Taskmaster also works with Mage Scribe, so that's a reason to take the Mage Scribe. This is actually generous Mummy. I talked about not wanting to give my opponents, I don't want to be generous to my opponent, but these two are quite literally unplayable, so I guess I just take the Mummy in this case. Okay. Tritolan Pilgrim, discover a spell in your deck and cast with random targets. Not a whole lot of spells in my deck, so it's not that one, because I don't like 8 mana 5/5. 2 mana 2/3. Honorable Kill upside is very good. Now, this is a 3 mana card, and I could actually play this on 3 after I play a 2 mana card, and then I buff my 2 mana card to 3 attack and then trade into something, so that's an option. Corporal is a better standalone card. Raid Leader could fit my deck if I have a tokeny style thing, a tokeny style deck. I don't think I'm flooding the board that much, so I think I will still take a Corporal over Raid Leader, even though this is a 3 mana card. The stat line's the same. If I'm already super ahead on the board, Raid Leader is excellent, but if I'm not super ahead on board, I'd rather have 2 mana 2/3. So we'll take this, and if I'm ahead on board, this is also okay too, because this can honorable kill. So this is just a safer pick. Okay. Cool deck. Quick review. We have some 1-drops. We have some 2-drops. We're light on 3s, which isn't great. Having extra 1-drops can make up for not having 3s because you can play 1 mana on ping. You can still play 2 mana cards on 2. You can save coin and try to coin out 4s. Our 4s are good. Our 5s are good. We did pick up some late game here. Mage Scribe and Rap Golem. Egwin is actually quite decent in this deck because after Egwin dies, we can eventually just play Ras for some huge combos. We have some value from Pinata, from Mage Scribe. Golem is a nice finisher. We have a little bit of Discover, Wand Thief, and Studies potentially into Steward of Scrolls. Curve is okay, not great. Missing 3s isn't good, but card quality is decent. Pretty happy with this deck. As you can see, there are some holes in it, and I could, at this point, ask myself, at what point in the draft was I offered 3 mana cards? Should I have valued that a bit more? I think we were offered another Microtech controller around cards 16, 17, 18, and at that point, it was around the time in the draft where I would start picking more for curve, but it was like, I didn't quite want to take it at that point, and because of that, we're a little light on 3s. But that's kind of how it goes. Overall, I still think this deck's kind of cool. All right, there's a draft. Hope you guys enjoyed. I think I'll be doing one more draft, but if not, I mean, this video is already kind of fucking long. We might leave it at this. This was probably good enough. All right, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Smash that subscribe button. This was more of an abstract video. Hope you guys liked it. I'll be trying to come up with ideas like this a bit more often instead of just putting out deck spotlights. I'll still be doing that, but I kind of want to add some cooler videos, and hopefully this fits the bill. So let me know if you guys did like this, and if you have some suggestions for what you would like to see, absolutely let me know in the comments. Happy drafting.